Hello everybody and welcome back to Rebellious Menstruation. I haven't done a book review in a while, and today's pick is Flung Out in Space by Grace Ellis and Hannah Templar. Initially published in 2022, it tells the story of how Patricia Highsmith's The Price of Salt, a lesbian novel published in 1952 under a pseudonym but Claire Morgan. The Price of Salt is notorious for having a happy ending. However, it's less of a happy ending and more of not a bad ending. So up until kind of that point, somebody had to die, somebody went back to their husband, the relationship kind of always ended up in misery or miserable, or the relationship made them miserable and they went back to kind of heteronormativity. And The Price of Salt was infamous for having the women, the main characters, choose each other, basically. So it was republished under a pseudonym in 1984, and again under the republished again under the original title of Carol, and under Highsmith's name in 1990. So it had two republications and it was massively influential. So it was adapted into the 2015 film with Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara under the Carol name. The novel was inspired by kind of a couple of different scenarios in just a couple of different experiences, should I say, in Highsmith's life. Including one where she had an encounter with a customer while working at the Bloomingdale's Children's Department as a temporary worker over Christmas. Flung Out of Space is a love letter to this novel, A Price of Salt, or Carol. I think moving forward I'll probably just call it Carol because that's the name of the reissue. It's the name that the Highsmith intended for the book, and it is the name of the movie. So it's a love letter to Carol, and it examines the notoriety of Highsmith and her career. Who Highsmith herself is far more well known for publishing thrillers, including The Talented Mr. Ripley and that kind of cohort of novels, which were also also made into movies. Highsmith drank, smoked, slept around, did have affairs with women, and this was kind of obviously notorious behaviour, especially for women in the 40s and 50s, 1940s and 1950s. And she also was kind of doing all this stuff while writing comic books early in her career, during the comic book moral degradation of children controversy. So that's kind of a whole another bit, but it was kind of like that comic books. It's kind of how people discuss technology nowadays. So the technology is degrading our children's mind, and technology is ruining them, and they can't concentrate. Literally, you could probably replace iPad with comic book and you'd have the same type of comments. That's kind of what was happening with the comic book controversy in the 40s and 50s. So if you know about that, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So that was probably another controversial aspect of her career, where she was working in an industry that was already kind of being blamed for the moral degradation of children, and then was also participating in lesbian behaviour. So that was kind of another thing as well. Not that was widely known at the time, but she looked down on comic book writing herself and refused to have her name associated with it and with the writing, and didn't have her name published in the comic books. She was also at this time working on her first novel, which became Strangers on a Train, And she was also choosing at the time to participate in psychological conversion therapy to cure her lesbianism, and seemingly being unable to cure it via conversion therapy and psychotherapy, kind of very much hated herself for that. So she very much willingly participated in that kind of version of conversion therapy, not from a religious perspective, but from like a personal perspective, because she kind of was not like, she did not like the fact that she was sexually attracted to women, basically. So this kind of chance encounter at Bloomingdale's and an affair that ended, so on one hand there was this kind of encounter at Bloomingdale's with this like a super beautiful woman, and on the other hand she had an affair with a woman who actually ended up returning to her husband and child, and she'd met that woman through one of her conversion therapy groups. And so those kind of two kind of events very much kind of inspired what went into Carol. And I suppose the ending where the women choose each other rather than walking away from each other or choosing the husband and the child. And in those days it possibly would have been a choice between choosing your husband and child or losing your child if you chose a woman. So it very much ran the risk for a lot of mothers at that time of losing their children, which obviously was a choice that a lot of women made to return to the husband as to not to lose their children. This graphic novel covers this particular period of Highsmith's life. During the writing of the first novel, the working on the comic books that she hated, and essentially the smoking, drinking, womanizing, and of course her search to kind of end or cure this womanizing types of ways. Side hint, she never did cure it, because it's not curable, because it's a natural, normal thing. So obviously her forceful personality got both her thrillers published, but also she pursued getting Carol published, even though it was turned down a lot, and even though it was rejected a lot, and even though she kind of hated this kind of part of herself, she really pursued getting Carol published, even though it was eventually published under both the pseudonym and under the more creative pulp fiction name. So initially she I'm just going to flip through it while I'm finishing Lost, because I realised I hadn't flipped through it. She had actually picked Carol first for the name of the book, and but when she got it published, it was published by an imprint, and this imprint editor was like, I'd love to publish this, but it will essentially be published as a pulp fiction book, and it will essentially be published kind of for the quick and easy kind of turnover of pulp fiction novels, and Carol wasn't really a pulp fiction-y name, and it needed to have that kind of salacious cover and that salacious name to kind of get published at all. So the price of salt was the name, inspired by when Lot's wife turned around, and is it Lot's wife? And got turned into a pillar of salt. So hence the price of salt. So gonna drop my camera, because that's sometimes what happens. She was quite obsessed with her cats, and she owned several over her lifetime, particularly Siamese cats, which you see through here. She met Stan Lee, who of course is infamously a comic book writer. She moved in these types of circles in spite of her behaviour and attitude. So she particularly pursued getting Carol published. However, she never published another lesbian novel again, and it kind of this kind of comic book, or this graphic novel, sorry, kind of really shows what a kind of self-hating queer artist in the 50s, struggling kind of to find her voice while also portraying deeply problematic viewpoints that created other controversy, particularly later on, including anti-Semitic, misogynistic and homophobic views. But this novel is not a kind of biographical novel. It's more of a kind of narrative arc, a kind of story of kind of vinaigrette pulled from her life rather than a detailed portrayal. So it's not a particularly like detailed look at her life. It's kind of a covered off look at her life, or particularly this kind of part of her life to get Carol published. And these authors kind of created a portrayal of a complex woman, out of pace with an equally complex world, and surrounded in all of the flaws that the creators were in reality what she was kind of like, more like. It does not add or take away from the revolutionary story that gave hope to an enraptured lesbian community in the 50s. And when she was republished under her own name, under Carol, in 1990, she actually did she did an afterward where she said that she got 10 to 15 letters a week from women who loved the story for years and years and years after it was published. So it actually made quite she realised the influence that it had had, in spite of not wanting to be a lesbian herself. So it is definitely worth a read. The writers again are Grace Ellis and Hannah Templer, and it is an imprint of Abrams Comic Arts, who publish other queer stories in the queer community. So that is Flung Out of Space, a story about Patricia Highsmith. Grab it and read it. It is actually quite interesting if you haven't grabbed Carol or watched the movie. Even if you have, this is actually quite an interesting kind of story about how that came to be. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your morning, afternoon or evening, depending of course where you are in the day, and I will catch up with you all in the next video. Bye everyone.